right, everybody, welcome back to the Women Going Big podcast. I am thrilled. This is the second guest that I've had on that has been referred by a previous guest. So, Miss Tressen is a life and health coach, and she was recommended by Brenda Ridgley, who was she was one of our first 3 interviews features on the second season of the Women Going Big podcast. So, Tressen, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, KrYsta.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no fluff here on the Women Going Big podcast. We get right to the point. Tressen, how are you going big?
Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a really transformational year for me. I became an author this year. I had done some speaking last year, but decided that I really, really enjoyed it so much that this year I have developed my keynote and have been giving that keynote. And just being able to see my clients flourish and reach the results that they wanted when they initially came to me. So things are just really moving in a forward direction, and it's taken me just staying with myself in that growth process to go big, right? And to say yes to the things that are calling me right now.
And I feel like it's easy, when I ask that question, essentially we're starting at the present, and then in the format of the show, we go backwards. Because what I like to show is that you share with us now where you are and you're flourishing, you're in this great season of life, but it hasn't always been like that. It's never like that. It doesn't happen overnight. So now what I would like to explore is, what did that journey to get here look like? Why a health and life coach? Why an author? What led you to here?
Right. Well, that is one of my favorite things to do, is to tell my story. And the reason being is that I feel like we can truly take the most damaging events of our lives and turn them into dynamic moments of change. And that is literally, those damaging moments are what brought me here. So you're 100% right on that. I was a happy kid. I was a tomboy, climbed all the trees, loved horses, all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of that came to a really screeching halt when my parents got divorced when I was 8 years old. And immediately we were leaving my dad. I didn't really know why. It was kind of crazy. There are 8 girls and 4 boys in my family, and I am right in the middle of that mix. So immediately I found that we were moving in with my stepfather. I didn't really know him. He was a stranger. And not too long after he and my mother got married, he became, brutally physically abusive to me and my siblings. And so, that was a very scary time in my life. And I had never had anything like that happen to me before. So I started to form core beliefs and an identity around those things that were happening. I thought, well, what did I do to deserve this? Am I doing something? I must be a bad kid. Because things like this weren't happening before, but they are now. So what is my behavior doing to incite these abusive, moments in my life? And I started to feel like I was a bad kid. I didn't feel like I could trust myself. All types of core beliefs and identity that I picked up. Also living in a household that was very stressful. We lived in small places. Oftentimes there wasn't enough food. There wasn't enough space for all of us. So I felt a lot of lack and grew up with a lot of lack as well. So those core beliefs began to kind of just place themselves, and how I took my identity out was being a people pleaser. So I became a people pleaser in order to appease and keep the peace so that the physical abuse wouldn't happen. And I started to look on the outside of myself for the answers because I didn't really trust myself. Moving along into, just another really hugely impactful time in my life. Oddly enough, my mother and stepfather thought that they were keeping us. They took me out of school in 3rd grade. So they thought that they were protecting me and my siblings from the evils of the world. They were very religious, and due to their core belief and identity and their very controlling behaviors, they took me out of school and taught me at home, where basically my abusive stepfather and my fearful mother were now my teachers, right? So I would sit there at the table and completely blank out, didn't feel like I could learn, didn't know what was wrong with me, formed a belief and identity that I wasn't smart at all, which literally led into my identity of years of not taking positions that I didn't feel I was qualified for. So hugely impactful on that. Started to look outside of myself, which led me into another huge part. I was not a sexual person. I hadn't had sex yet. My mother had decided to let me go back into public school as a junior in high school. And I was 15 years old at the time. I was went back in, and just due to all of the things we have now. So we have, all this social media and everything that puts so much pressure on us to look a certain way, be a certain way, all of these types of things, which are parts of us that are protective parts trying to do what they do. But I was seeing supermodels, and I thought that if I could look like them, I would be really accepted by my peers in high school. And started to dress promiscuously. The boys in my school, would kind of associate us with the words tits and ass, so they were also being influenced by the media and TV and magazines that they were seeing at that time in my life. I'm almost going to be 56 years old here pretty soon, so we didn't have phones at that point in time. But anyhow, quite influenced by that, and thought that if I dressed that way and that's what I needed to be, then I would be accepted. And that got me into a lot of trouble. I ended up taking a ride home with a girlfriend one night from two high school age boys that I thought were our friends. And they took her home, but they didn't take me home. They took me out into a field, and one of the boys took me out of the car and raped me. So, my stepfather figured out where I was. I didn't come home on time. He picked me up by my neck, took me out to the car. And where did we go the next morning? Straight to church. So a lot of things in my life have led me to where I am now. I sat in church, felt very judged, really felt like I didn't have anybody. I was physically and emotionally injured at that time. Kept that secret, couldn't tell anybody for years and years and years of my life, and really formed more core beliefs and identity about myself at that time, that God is really bad. Had been heavily influenced. Now, as you can see, there's a Buddha behind me. I believe in all types, all faiths, all religions. I believe in God. I've repaired that relationship, but all, as you can hear throughout my story, everything was an untruth about me. So my point to telling these very intimate and straightforward parts of my life is that no matter what we go through, we place meaning on those things. And when we start to be tired and weary of this, the thing that changed my life was that I decided to have children in my mid-30s. And honestly, my children changed my life, because I knew I was not going to take myself into the relationship with my kids being this type of person in the planet. But I always knew underneath that there was more for me, and I didn't know where to begin. I didn't know where to start. So I started reading, but I would read through a book as fast as I could and gain information and knowledge, but I didn't have the embodiment of it. I wasn't practicing. I would skip over a meditation and say I would do it later. I wouldn't do the journaling. So it was through hiring my own coaches, learning what embodiment of material actually means, and living it as a working daily practice in my life. All of those things are a culmination of what has led me to this point. And really wanting to be able to share that with other people so that they know that they too can go as big as they want to as well.
I I love that story. I love all of the stories that you just shared. I think that sharing tough and intimate conversations are the strings that tie us all together.
Yes.
And I don't think it's one of the reasons I started this podcast is I hate small talk. That's one of the reasons
Yeah.
why these conversations fill me up so much, because those are the stories that I want to connect with people over. And I really think that those are the
Mm-hmm.
things that create relationships and create opportunity, and I think more opportunity for connection, like real connection
Yes.
beyond social
Mm-hmm.
media. I
Yeah.
get so frustrated with social media because it's so shallow. You see the top
Yeah.
1 to 3% of people's lives. How do you get to know somebody that way? So,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing your story. I know that change doesn't happen overnight. I mentioned that, getting started, but you talked about making a lot of big moves. What was the very first thing for you that, you had mentioned you started reading, but what was it like for you to be aware and to have the discipline, I guess, to say, no, I'm going to absorb this. I'm going to embody this. I'm going to be present reading this. How did you go from just skipping over everything to really absorbing and being in your body? Because that's tough. It's tough to do in this age.
Yeah. It is. And, to your point of really not feeling deeply connected on social media, I feel like social media could be a trailhead, so to speak. If you see someone that you really feel connected with, or that you might have a connection, it's being able to do the old fashioned way of actually reaching out to that person and saying, hey, let's get together for coffee. Or if they're across the country, let's meet on Zoom, just like you and I are today. We're getting to know each other better today because we purposely decided to co-create with each other today and to go to a deeper level. And that's really what it takes. So thank you for inviting me into your life and your world to do that, because it's when we say yes to these opportunities. So my talk that I give is called The Starting Point. And the reason I call it that is because we deserve to have a beginning point where we say yes to ourselves. And I knew that I had lived enough pain. The two stories, or the partial stories that I've shared with you, are a very small portion of what I have been through in my life. And I feel like I've lived so many lifetimes just in this one life, as I think probably most of us have. So I continue to listen to that inner voice. And I have learned so much about so many things now, that I know that we have an injured self, and we have these injured parts of us. And one might be the critic, one might be the judge, one might be the internal voice that tells us we're not good enough or we're not smart enough. But those are parts of ourselves. They are not who we are. And so somehow I continued to listen to a level deeper underneath that. Um, it was my longing internally to get back in touch with the thing that I came here as, that I believe we all come here as this innate, beautiful consciousness that knows it doesn't need to learn something, it already knows. It doesn't need to gather love, it is love. It doesn't need to understand, it already is understanding. And so returning to that over and over and over again with fresh starting points in my life is literally how I did it, brick by brick.
Mm-hmm.
Hiring coaches. Used to say, I would see a coach speak at a business meeting, and I would say, wow, that's really cool. But I would immediately talk myself out of it, because I told myself that lack part of myself would come up, and I would say, I don't have the money for that. And I would meet with the person. I would get super excited about the opportunity of having a guide, and I would cancel it. And that little part of myself would talk myself out of it. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough time. You don't have enough this or that. So it was moment by moment by moment, and actually just repeatedly being able to say yes to the things that the world, the universe, the divine, whatever listeners call that, um, the internal voice that we have, saying yes to it over and over and over again, and being willing to do something unknown. Um, we know that we cannot continue to repeat over and over again the same autopilot mechanisms that we've built in and the same neural pathways that we have and make something new out of our life. So I began to take new paths, and I did it intentionally. And I didn't go to 20 years of therapy. I've probably been to 3 or 4 therapy sessions in my entire 55 years of life. I'm not putting therapy down, but I have found for me personally that knowing that everything comes from within me, and then finding guides that could lead me on that journey have been the most valuable.
Mm. There are so many things there that I'm storing away for later. One of the things that I really want to touch on is you said that it we already have, like, whatever it is, whether it's love, understanding, knowledge, decisions, we already have those things in us. So if you change the mindset
Mm-hmm.
from, oh, I can't do this, or I don't understand this, or I can't love this person, to I already know this, I already love this person, how powerful is
Mm-hmm.
that? Like, that is such a small language shift. But what if all of the
Yes.
listeners right now just decided that they already know the answer to the question they're asking? It's mind blowing.
Yes. It's truly transformational, because by you just simply asking that question, what if all of the listeners decided that they did have that in them? And, it's really amazing to understand yourself well enough to know that you do have the power of choice to decide what you think and believe. And if you decide that you do have that power within you, you may not know how to access it because you haven't been taught how to do so. But we live in an information age now where if you go after that, you're going to find people who have already done it and can help you understand how to do it. So if we just said, what if? What if I just allowed a starting point, one fresh little moment to say, I bet you I could find a new way? Because what we do is we look for evidence, and your brain's main focus and main purpose is to keep you surviving. And what we want to try to get to is a level of thriving instead of just survival mode. um, if you can find evidence in your life of someone else who's done what you want to do, go in that direction, and um, start looking for things to give you proof that it can be done, that you do have choice. Um, Starting small is totally key, because we can't go, from a sympathetic nervous system that is dysregulated and very upset. There's no way that we're going to be able to heal, learn, grow, even rest or digest from that point. So it's being still for a moment, understanding that you have a starting point there, calming yourself down for a minute enough to stop this back part of the brain. The question you asked is, what if I could do that? That's a forward focused part of the brain. And what I mean by that is, if you said to a little kid, stop running, the last thing that that kid hears is the word running. And so the brain can only focus on one thing at a time. And the word it's hearing is running. And so the kid just keeps running and he just goes down. If you say to the kid, please walk, now the centers of the brain are opening up in a totally different way. And your brain knows that that's survivable. It can do that.
Mm-hmm.
It goes, walk. Okay, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing please. Now that lights up the third center of the brain, which allows us to start creating and thinking about what's going on. And then we get the forward focus part of the brain. And when all three of those centers light up, we say yes to ourselves over and over again. But it's a simple question that you just asked that starts that process.
I love talking about personal journeys and decision making, because I firmly believe that we are always one decision away from, achieving whatever you want to achieve. But it starts with making one decision. It starts with taking one step going that way. And I think the
Yes.
biggest thing that I love talking about and I love hearing from other professionals is developing that inner voice. Because again, that also
Mhm.
doesn't happen overnight. That's something that I think we're all continually working on. But there's people, like you mentioned, that are living in autopilot, and I see it. We see it a lot on
Yes.
social media. People going throughout their lives in this tunnel, not thinking about where they're going, who they're talking to, what's going on around them. And that takes practice to be quiet
Okay.
and still enough to develop that inner voice. What would be your recommendation or advice to somebody that might feel like they're going through the hamster wheel and can't hear themselves
Yeah.
and they want to develop that?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I use kind of an analogy similar with my clients all the time, that you're in a roundabout and you just keep going round and around and around, and really what you're looking for a new exit.
Mm,
So it's going to take you in a new direction. And for one, it's just literally saying yes to the idea that you're going to try something new, and paying close attention when a part of yourself shows up to try to talk you out of it.
mm,
So we have these voices. We have the inner critic. They're just basically parts of us. We all have them, and they they just came from beliefs that we picked up that we think are true about ourselves. And so, the not good enough, the not smart enough, all that thing. I'm going to talk you out of taking this new exit because you're not smart enough to go there. You're not smart enough to go do that. So, if someone feels like they're in a pattern and they need a pattern interrupter, right? Um, it is literally doing something. You can test yourself about on the smallest little things. You could trick yourself. Uh, what if the most influential person in your life didn't exist anymore today? And just asking that question, like maybe you've got someone who is toxic, who is whatever. What space would that open you up to do if you just pretended for 1 minute that that person just wasn't there? You could just poof with your mind and just pretend and allow yourself for 1 minute to go, who would you be without the thought that you can't operate your life unless you manage this person first? You know, um, who can you think of a stress-free reason in your life to continue having this person in your life or continue having this pattern? Well, if the answer to that is no, then you want to look for something new. We have these patterns. So say I want something and I'm here at the very top of it, and I can go all the way this way and I can complain about it and I can make it rough and tough and I can see how terrible it is, and then I get to the point where I'm still doing the thing. Or I can start on this side of it and I can be grateful for the opportunity to grow. I can look for the blessing in it. I can find that nobody else is coming to rescue me. I get to be powerful in my own decision and decide how I feel about it and still take care of my business, right? And we got something done. Like you could use something as simple as taking out the trash.
mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
wow, this really builds my character. Wow, someone that sees me and has this skill is going to really appreciate that. This is something that I'm really proud of, is the daily things that I actually have the trash to take out and I have a place to take it. Or, oh my gosh, blah, 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 blah. Why didn't the kids do this? Why didn't my partner do this? All the way. And then you take all this whole way, you're giving yourself cancer.
Hmm.
And all this whole way, you're building a brand new muscle and taking that exit and getting out of the pattern. And now you turn around and you come back in after taking the trash out and you have absolute proof that there is a different way to do things once you choose it.
Yeah, I love all of that. I love the way you explained it because it's a way that it makes sense, right? Like in a very clear way, but I've never heard it explained like that. And I like what you
Mhm.
said is that going one way, you're spreading cancer in yourself. You're spreading negativity. I
Yeah.
feel like it's easier to be negative about the things happening to you and you can say these things are happening to me. I really try to look at life as having doors open. where is this an opportunity,
Yes.
or how is this an opportunity? How can I learn from this? What is the universe trying to tell me? When I talk to people, I have like a long history of entrepreneurship, a long history of having different kinds of jobs, contractor positions, like you name it, I've done it. Um, and I believe that going through all of those open doors has really developed me into the person that I am. And I wish I could shout that
Yes.
from the rooftops. Like, just go do the things, go, just say yes and see, like you said, see the opportunity and the blessings and in the other side of the circle.
Yes. I think it's important to understand and realize that no matter where we are, we placed ourselves in that position somehow
Mm.
by a series of saying yes to a certain thing. So, I like to, if someone's in a job and they don't like it, I just want them to kind of do a turnaround or a U turn and say, this is a position. It's not necessarily job, it's a position. And I had a series of things that I said yes to that got me into this particular position in my life. Even when the trash is full, there are certain things that I did. I created a family, or I have a partner, or I cooked some dinner last night. I mean, you can make it as simple as you can so that your brain doesn't get scared of it and just go, hey, I said yes to a series of things that ended me up in this position. So, what new set of yeses do I want to create for myself that say yes to all of the new identities that I want to have? So, I don't drink except for on occasion. I am, of course, of my life sent me into deep, deep, deep drug addiction, deep, deep, deep alcohol addiction. And so all of that, once I started to grow, all of that fell away. I didn't have to go into a treatment center. I didn't have to go anything. Once I started to grow, I literally healed myself from the inside out. So now, what does a person with the identity who doesn't drink do? They do not go into the restaurant or wherever and ask for the drink menu anymore. So you get to build yourself a new identity based on the new position that you want to be in your life. And you can literally put yourself into your body and you view your body and say, what does this new identity person look like? You know, where does she go? What does she say yes to? How about this? What kind of clutter needs to be cleared in order to clear the way for the new exit that we're taking? Okay. Do we literally have clutter in our lives, in our homes, those types of things? And if so, that's talking the brain into doing one little tiny small thing a day where we pick one thing up, not 20, one thing up. Because once you start doing it, then you light up the second center of your brain and your brain starts to say yes. Before you know it, you're in the jam and you got a whole thing picked up. Um, you know, it's just these incremental little moments of saying yes and then also deciding what we will no longer say yes to. So when you say no to something, you have to replace it. When you decide you're going to let go of something, your brain and the parts of yourself need something new to work on. So replace it with something that you do want. And then it's just literally the practice, the daily practice of saying yes to yourself. So I challenge people to say you're walking up a set of stairs, start going up the stairs with the opposite foot that you normally would go. Because I'm telling you, every single time, if you go up, like test yourself today, if you go to pick something up, you're going to pick it up with your dominant hand every time. But if you challenge yourself for like 1 hour to pick everything up with your left hand, you are literally going to get so present in the moment and you're going to be like, wow, I am consciously having to create right now a new neural pathway because I do things on autopilot all the time without noticing. And it's kind of fun to challenge yourself to do that.
Hmm.
And then you can use that on other things in your life.
I love that. And I'm really passionate about letting women know that like having a choice is powerful. Um, I know there's
Yes.
a lot of women around the world that don't have a choice in a lot of things. And anytime that I can bring this up, I do with the podcast. I think in the last episode I did the same thing, but like you have the choice right now, listening to this conversation, to make these changes. Like, be present
Yeah.
enough to take in the words that we're saying and decide, because you can right now. The world and the dreams and the business and the goals, whatever you want, is accessible to you. You just have to decide what, like you said,
Yeah.
what it looks like and what is one small thing that you can do today to help you get there.
Yeah. Yeah, and ask for the help. Surround yourself with people who, when I was heavily into addiction and abuse and all of that, I totally surrounded myself with people who would get high with me and who were also in pain and would join me in my suffering. So, it made me easier to stay stuck. And so, what person could you reach out to? Um, to just give you some ideas. And even if you're on such a budget, or can you find one thing to read? Can you find one free YouTube thing that you could watch a day? The library is free. There are so many resources to people who may be struggling financially in order to have a starting point. I didn't think I had any money in order to begin. And, that's the reason I didn't have any money, was because I kept telling myself I didn't have any, So, yeah, I mean, I added into my talk recently Viktor Frankl, who was in the concentration camp. In,
Mhm.
1 in 28 people would survive the concentration camp. And most of the people in the concentration camp were saying, you know, are we going to survive this? Because if we don't survive it, then all of the suffering that we've been taking in has no meaning. And he said for him, life is unconditional and we are going to suffer. But what his meaning that he took from it is, he said, what meaning does the suffering have?
Mhm.
Because if we do make it out, then we want to take that meaning, right?
Mhm.
He was like, it's not whether you survive the suffering or not. It's the value you give to the suffering in that very moment. It's not dependent on whether you survive it or not. It's the value. That's where you find your strength and your personal power to persevere, and your resilience. Because if you're basing the meaning of your, you know, damaging moment on whether you survive or not, the meaning has been lost.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's beautiful when you can look at these damaging events, and you know what? They're put into our lives specifically for us to, it's like having a golden key to what you just mentioned, the doorways of life. When you are suffering, that is a signal that you should take the exit and go another direction. Like, it was put there as a complete and total blessing to show you to look for a new way to go.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing, like I mentioned, I've been an entrepreneur for 10 years, so I'm used to going through the doors. I'm used to seeing when they pop
Mhm.
up. I'm used to seeing when a door closes or when it's time to move on. And so I've worked that muscle.
Yes.
I know what that's like, but I think one of the things I'm most passionate is helping people see that for themselves, and that's not even my job. Like I'm not even like a coach or anybody, but I think through having these conversations, I just hope that somebody might be like, "Oh, there's opportunity here. Oh, maybe I'll sit back and
Yes.
do a meditation and try to listen to, what is it that I really want? And is that being influenced by outside factors, outside, I don't know what the word, I'm having a hard time with words today, but I think you know what I mean.
That's okay.
So yeah, I think this
Yeah.
conversation really, really touched on all those things. So
Yeah, absolutely. We just asking the question, what is it that I want, is so powerful. Um, I don't know how many people have taken the time. We design our kitchen, we put a certain set of earrings on, Everyone is completely obsessed with their eyebrows and their turkey necks right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
so enmeshed in all of that, and we're designing that, and what do we
Mhm.
have, and what, those are great. They're fun parts of life, but why not design yourself
Mhm.
and from the inside out?
Yeah.
And I would actually venture to say that you do have that purpose. You don't have to be a life coach.
Mhm.
You don't have to have some certificate or some PhD or whatever. You obviously are listening to a calling, KrYsta, on this podcast, some voice within you, and who knows how big the ripple effect is going to be. But my imagine would be that someone's going to hear your story and go, wow, I'm an entrepreneur as well. Look at what she's doing. I can go create something. I want to talk to guests. Or, we are all influential in our own ways. And I just want to acknowledge that in you today. For one, it takes something within you to be brave enough and vulnerable enough just to open up in these types of conversations. And that's you saying yes. And I would 1,000,000% say that you're doing that so that someone else can follow and do the same and see that in themselves. So, absolutely,
Mhm.
you're rocking it.
Thank you so much. It's tough because this is a passion project. It's something I do for fun to fill my cup. And I truly, like, so deeply in my heart and in my soul, like, I know, like, it's not big right now. Like, my listenership is not that big, but it takes one person, right? Like, if one listener can listen to one of these episodes and be influenced,
Mhm.
or like in a good way, like
Yes,
to take something from it and it can change their life in 1%, and they can start with one decision
yes,
like we talked about today. That's it. The purpose for this has been
yes.
done. So, I thank you. I just that's the purpose of the show, and it just really touches my heart that you see that. So, thank you so much.
Anything big was accomplished by the first step. Anything big. We fool ourselves with the social media thinking that people started where they were. And I will tell you, even anybody that did start really, really big doesn't necessarily have this internal self love going on. So everybody has their own starting point, and it literally begins with just one yes to the self. So yeah, who knows if that one person that watches your show, we fool ourselves by thinking we need to have 10,000 followers. We fool ourselves. Now, do we want to reach as many people as possible? Yes, but I have a feeling that this is going to grow and do that as just a natural thing that happens because of the message that you're showing up as. One person will tell another, and a person will tell another, and someone will see it. And so that is just going to be something that naturally happens. But for you, it's not about your number, it's about impact and the value that you may be able to share with someone else. So, yeah, it's going to spread like wildfire.
Thank you. Um, I
Hmm.
I love these conversations. I just come away. The rest of my day is phenomenal. I feel like I've met a new sister, a new friend, a new, strong female character in my book, and I thank you for taking the
Yes,
time out of your day to be here and having this conversation with me. So, um,
absolutely. My
Tressen,
pleasure.
I always give this opportunity as we wrap up here. I always like to make sure, because there's things I know that have been on my heart through this conversation and things that have come up. But is there anything else that you want to share or that's on your heart that you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
The biggest thing that I would say that has come for me out of this whole journey and getting to this point where I'm sitting right here with you is coming to the understanding that every bit of change in my life comes from within. Nothing external has an effect on me unless I allow it to. It's just the icing on the cake, you know, these external things that we get to experience in life. But wherever I go, there I am with myself. And when I turn towards the critical part, the injured part, the judge, the not good enough, and all of those parts, and I love on them, and I just give them so much love, they drop a lot of that and they open up space to do something new and productive in my life. And so, from the inside out is the biggest thing I would share. That's how it works.
I love that. And I started something new with my last episode in an effort to inadvertently connect the guests on my show. Tressen, if you could leave a message for the next strong woman that I interview on the show, what would it be?
You know, I would say that we see you. We see you because showing up as a strong woman has its challenges. Going big has its challenges. And as we are the people who get up at 6 in the morning and stay up after to make sure an episode was recorded or taped or released, as I have a client at 6 a.m. in the morning to match a schedule or whatever it is, I just would want the next woman who's on her journey to know that I see them. I may not even know them, but keep going. You're doing what it takes. You're extraordinary. You're unique. And the message and the story that you have to tell is so valuable and important.
I love that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with those messages yet, but I'm going to figure it out, and I'm excited to see what it turns into. Tressen, thank you again so much for being on the show. Where can people find you? What do you have going on? Give us all the details on how our listeners can connect and possibly work with you.
Well, thank you for asking about that. I have so much appreciated it. I really do. My business is Love and Life Coaching, and that's LOVIN. There's no G on it. So www.loveandlifecoach.com. You can find me there. I do offer a 50-minute free complimentary discovery session with people who are wanting to explore something new, a new exit for themselves, getting off that hamster wheel. And I am available for a 1 hour keynote. I love to talk to human resource groups, parent teacher groups, teachers, youth. If I would have heard my message and my talk when I was in high school, it probably would have changed my life. It would have changed the trajectory of my life because I would have began questioning my beliefs about myself. Nobody ever taught me how to do that. So keynote speaking, and then I do also offer a workshop after the keynote if someone would like to add that on. LGBTQ plus ally groups. Definitely love to speak to those people. So anyone that's looking for speakers, anyone that is wanting to go to loveandlifecoach.com, recently wrote a chapter as a co-author in a book called The Book I Read, Volume 2. Just came out and become an international bestseller on Amazon. You can find me there and in different workshops around. So anybody that would like to, I'm on Facebook, loveandlifecoach.com or loveandlifecoaching.com. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, all of the regular places at loveandlifecoaching.com.
Perfect. I'll make it really easy for our listeners. All of those links will be in the show notes. So you don't have to remember them.
Okay, great.
They're all going to be below for you. You just need to click on them and connect with Tressen. So once again, thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners tuning in. Like I said, I hope you decide for yourself to make that one decision today, to take that single step, to think about your decisions and opportunities in a different light. And we'll see you back next week with a new episode. So thank you all for tuning in, and thank you, Tressen, for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you, KrYsta.